Greetings, fellow time travelers and everyone still stuck on Earth. This is another LinuxCollections.com how-to video for your education, information, and entertainment. Let's get rolling. Today we're installing Debian 9.0.0, the brand new release out from Debian called Stretch, and we are just installing the AMD 64 onto a standard old PC. We have booted from the DVD and we're walking through that. So it starts off by loading up the installation and things like that, detects the network hardware. There's a whole sequence of events that happens. In this case, there's a Realtek card and it asks, do you have the firmware? And we're going to say no. It probably will be different on your system. If you do have the firmware, you can load it. And then it goes out and does its network configuration. We have a DHCP that gives you an address, but it doesn't give you internet access, and we'll fix that up at the end. So away it goes, and then it asks for the host name. Here, this is just a test system. We're going to call it Debian 9.0.0. If you're not sure about a domain name, you don't have a domain name, Workgroup is a good one to use. Then it asks for the root password. In this case, very simple. We're just using Linux, something we can remember. You would want to use a good root password in there. And then it asks for a user. Same thing. We're just building a simple user with the name user and the password user. You would want to do the appropriate things. For your time zone, you can enter that. Go out and look for the disk, and it loads a partitioning section, and this is where you decide how to configure the disk. We always recommend you use the entire disk. Kind of zoom through that, but we just selected the entire disk. It confirms that, and then it partitions and it formats it for us. Once the partitioning and formatting is done, it will begin to install the base system. Now this takes quite a bit. There are a few questions that'll pop up, so we're actually going to let time work for us, and we kind of move through this a lot faster than it would be if you were actually doing the install. And once it gets the base system set up, it will start configuring the system, which consists of installing and setting up various pieces of software that will give the installation what it needs to continue. And the first thing it's going to do is ask, do you have other DVDs you want to scan? And we actually are going to say yes. We're going to scan all 14 DVDs. And it goes through a process where it says, I've scanned it, please insert the next disk, etc., etc., etc. So we're going to walk through that a few times. And again, we're going to use the magic of video editing to get and zoom past all the disks. So after we get past 3, we will quickly zoom by here and get to the 14th DVD. At that point, of course, we're going to say no, we have no more DVDs to scan, and then it asks, hey, it's time to insert the main binary 1, or the first disk of the set. So we have to go back and do that, and then it's going to configure everything, knowing now where all the software is it might need. Then it will begin the installation. So it's going to ask to select the software, and there's a couple more questions it asks us. The first one is the popularity contests, and indeed we typically say no. We don't want to be involved in that. And in fact, as I mentioned, we're not even on the internet, although I'm sure it can record and send it later, but no. No on the popularity contest here. And finally then it's going to ask what type of system are you going to install. We're just going to do the basic desktop with a GNOME desktop manager, and away we go. Now this takes a little bit. We're going to use the magic again of video editing to zoom by all that, and we will finally get to the part where all the software has been installed and it starts to configure everything, and then it cleans it up, and we are finally ready to finalize this installation of Debian 9. So after the software has been installed, it wants to do the grand unified bootloader, or the grub bootloader, and this gives you the option of putting it as the master boot record, and here it's just one hard drive, one system. We're saying yes, and we will have now a bootloader so that it will load up and load the Debian 9 system. Grub typically gives you a front-end menu where you can select either the main system or a rescue system, and that's pretty typical with the Debian. And we do have to wait for it to finalize and finish and get everything set up and put the boot record down so that when the hard drive boots, it loads Grub, which then loads the Debian system when selected. So after that's all done, we can finally set up the users and passwords, finalize the installation, close all the open files and wrap everything up and unmount and eject the CD-ROM. Once all that is complete, the installation is done, it's successful, it's time to boot your new system. So we're going to go ahead and click on continue, finalizing, unmounting the file systems, and we'll do the reboot. So now the system reboots, and here's our grub menu. We select the Debian GNU Linux. It goes through a quick process that we have edited for time to zoom through this. We get to the logon screen, which gives us our user. We select that, enter the user's password, which is user, or you would use whatever user and password that you provided when you created the system. And it will bring us to the GNOME desktop, and we'll see that it fades in nicely. Nice visuals from the Debian 9 system. We're ready to go. So we mentioned way back at the beginning we don't have internet, so we're going to walk through the configuration of that. We're going to go to the wired connection, wired settings, and we will select the, we'll turn off the current connection, go to the configuration, which is the little gear in the bottom right, and go to the IPv4 settings, turn off the automatic and go to manual. We're going to punch in an address that works on our system to connect out through the gateway to the internet. So we're entering that specific information to this network. You would enter the appropriate things on your end. And then for the DNS, or the domain name servers, we want to put in the appropriate ones for our internet service provider, and we'll go ahead and enter those IP addresses. Initially, trying to do with a comma, as some systems like, then try to space, as some systems like. Well, it turns out there's an entry for each actual IP address. We got to click the plus and add the other one and make sure there's no spaces, and then go ahead and apply. Turn on the connection now that we have the correct internet settings, and let's go see if we are live. So we'll close that, hop over to the activities, and go to Firefox, and we do have internet. We're actually connected to the default things that come with Debian, but we're going to change that to some, cool website like, let's say LinuxCollections.com, and that proves that we are on the internet on this brand new Debian 9 system. So thanks for joining us on this journey. This is LinuxCollections.com signing off.